So, UFC Fight Night, Grant Dawson versus Bobby Green is among us this weekend, and I think it is a pretty stacked card. Not from top to bottom, but there is a good amount of fights on it that are going to be entertaining, I think. And I'm going to be giving you guys my breakdowns and predictions for this upcoming UFC Fight Night card. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. The first fight I'm going to be going over is Bill Algeo versus Alexander Hernandez. Now, this fight is at featherweight. I believe that Alexander Hernandez just had one fight at lightweight against Jim Miller, but before that he had a fight against Billy Q down at featherweight, where he looked drained, he looked gassed out early, got finished in the second round, late in the second by Billy Q. But after that, he had a good performance against Jim Miller, where he looked good, And Jim Miller, while he's old, while he's aging, he's a crafty vet, grizzled vet, been around since sliced bread. You know what I mean? And if we look at his last fight, where the guy came in on short notice in his debut, and Jim Miller absolutely smoked him in like 10 seconds. So while Jim Miller is old and is not a great name, well, he is a good name, but what I mean is not a great win. If you're not legit, if you're not where you're supposed to be, Jim Miller will check you and he will put you in your place. And I think that Hernandez looked pretty good against Jim Miller. You know what I mean? I do think he looked good against Jim Miller. And then he got finished by Moicano before that, but Moicano is a good fighter. And then, he had a first-round knockout before that, but his last two outings were the ones that I'm going to focus on. The one against Hernandez, the one against Quarantillo, and the one against Miller. I think that Hernandez has speed, but at featherweight, he's a bit drained. And also, in general, at featherweight, he doesn't have as big of a speed advantage he did at lightweight, where he was normally the much faster guy on the feet at lightweight. Now at featherweight, he's not. The guys at featherweight are much faster, and also he's very shredded, very drained at featherweight, and he seems to gas out pretty quickly. And then I think his cardio will be an issue. So I do see Bill Algeo finishing this fight in the second round, maybe the third round, by submission. Now, move on to the next fight. Ian Cutelaba versus Felipe Lins. Now, I'm not too fond of Cutelaba. I don't think he's a great fighter, but I do think he has skills. And it's just his fight IQ is not that good. But I think the guy has skills. People have to shit on him, but I think he does have some skills. Like remember when he beat Tanner Boser in round one? I know Tanner Boser, not a great fighter, but still, I definitely think he'll have the speed advantage over Lins, and he should be able to catch him early on if he capitalizes on it, kind of like he did to Tanner Bose. But if he gets too reckless, like he has a tendency to do, then Lins could catch him. But then again, it's not like Lins is some finishing machine on the feet. But Cutelaba at the same time is definitely finishable. So I could see Lins finishing him if Cutelaba gets too reckless. But still, I don't think Lins is one of those guys where if you leave yourself open, like you're going to get finished. You know what I mean? I don't think he is. Plus, he's pretty old for the division. And I just, the Tanner Boser loss has just aged poorly for Lins. And most of Kutelaba's losses have aged pretty well, like Johnny Walker and Magomed Ankalaev. Those losses aged pretty well, considering that those guys are fighting soon, and the winner is going to be in title talks. So you know what I mean? That win has aged pretty well. And the Nezacheku loss and the Span losses have aged pretty poorly for Cutelaba as well, so double-edged sword there. If I'm going to bring up those losses for Lins, I got to bring up the losses for Cutelaba as well. But I definitely want to bring up that I think that those losses have aged well for Cutelaba, the Walker loss and the Ankalaev loss. Losses to Ankalaev, he lost twice to him. But so I think that Cutelaba will have the advantage, and I think he's going to be looking to finish this fight. And I think he'll probably finish this fight by round 2 TKO, possibly round 1 if he's able to catch Lins early. The next fight I want to talk about is Drew Dober versus Ricky Glenn. Now, both guys are coming off first-round KO losses, but Ricky Glenn's KO loss has aged a little worse than Dober's. Well, Dober's hasn't really... Dober got knocked out by Favola, which was Favola's last win, so I can't say it's aged well yet. But Glenn's knockout was to Grigoros, and he just got finished on the Mexican Independence Day card. So, I'd say his lockout loss hasn't aged that well. Drew Dober has the advantage in power, but Glenn does have finishing potential on the feet as well. So this could be a very interesting fight on the feet. We look back at some of Dober's fights where he's been taking some shots on the chin. I don't know if we want to do that against Glenn too much. I know Glenn isn't some knockout artist, but he's not like a Bobby Green where he can hit you all you want and he's not going to knock you out. Dober has a better chin, but we'll have to see how he looks after that Favola loss and all the damage he took in that loss. with the big knockdown and the follow-up shots. And also, he's just been taking a lot of damage in all of his fights, taking a lot of shots on the chin. But yeah, Dober should be able to win this one. I see him outlasting the early onslaught from Glenn and hurting him in the second round. And I see him winning by decision, but he could also finish Glenn if he catches him badly and doesn't give him time to recover. So I could also see him winning by knockout. I just think that Dober's a step above Glenn. You know what I mean? I think that they're on different levels in terms of skill, in terms of career trajectory. I do think that he's a bit better of a fighter than Ricky Glenn. I think he has some wins that have aged pretty well. And I'm picking him to win. Honestly, I'm going to go by finish. I don't know what I'm saying about decision. I think I'm going to go by Drew Dober by knockout. Probably a round 2 knockout for Drew Dober. Possibly a round 1 knockout if he's able to catch Glenn early, but I see a round 2 TKO for Dober. I think this is a pretty favorable matchup for now, and unless Dober's declining, he should be able to beat Glenn, in my opinion. So yeah, official prediction, Drew Dober round 2 TKO. The next one I want to talk about is Alex Morono versus Joaquin Buckley. Now, I'm excited for this fight because I like both guys. Now, I know Morono can be a little snoozy sometimes when he's really point fighting, but other than that, I think most of his fights are pretty good. And Buckley is one of my more preferred fighters because I think that he's very entertaining. Outside of fighting, sometimes he does some things that I'm not a huge fan of, but don't all fighters, you know what I mean? I think Buckley's a pretty entertaining guy, and I think he's pretty likable for the most part too. I say Morono would win the fight if he fought a perfect fight, but I think that's a lot to ask of a guy who's so patient and kind of hesitant as Morono is against an aggressive, explosive guy like Buckley, who's shown that he's willing to take these risks to come inside and land his big shots. And I think he'll definitely be willing to take these risks against a guy like Morono, who's not known as a guy that will catch you clean and put you out, you know what I mean? Morono does have good defensive abilities, but he's a point fighter at the end of the day, and he's been shown to be hittable later in the fight, like in his fight with Ponzinibbio. And at this stage in his career, I just think that Buckley's a step above Pons, in terms of speed and power. Like, Pons obviously still has, like, one-shot KO power, or, like, one-shot fight-changing power, I should say. And, but if he's catching you and putting away, I think Buckley will be able to do the same, probably earlier in the fight. Like, Ponzinibbio had, like, a late dramatic comeback knockout against Morono. I don't think it will be that late in the fight and that of much of a rally for Buckley where he's really losing this fight and he comes back late in the third and catches him. I think it'll be like a second round kind of thing, where like Morono will probably win the first round. I'd probably say he'll win the first round comfortably enough. But I think Buckley will land some shots, and I think that in the second round is when it's really going to be Morono try to stay away from Buckley, and we'll have to see if he's going to be able to do it. Morono does have finishing ability when it comes to the mat, but I don't like his chances of taking Buckley down and subbing him. I just don't like the odds of him doing that. You could definitely make an argument that that's going to happen, but I wouldn't pick that to happen, is what I mean. So I think that my official prediction for this fight is going to be a Buckley round 2 TKO, probably later in the second half of the second round. I think he's going to catch Morono, not give him a chance to recover. He might catch him earlier on and not finish him, but I think he'll catch him in the second, not give him a chance to recover, and just catches him, hurts him, and he finishes him off. Now, the next fight I'm going to go over is the co-main event of the evening. One of the most exciting fights on the card. Honestly, I'd say this fight is more exciting than the main event. So I think this is the people's main event. Joe Pyfer versus Abdul Razak Al-Hassan. Now, both these guys have one-shot KO power early in the fight. They both have early knockouts in the first round. But I think that Pyfer has crisper boxing, faster combos. So I think I'll give him an advantage. And then Al-Hassan has more powerful. He's more powerful when he does his big wind-up shots, like his huge head kicks, like when he knocked out the guy I'm not good at his name, Alessi Di Tichorio, that Italian guy. He knocked him out like 15 seconds in with a head kick, one of the most powerful head kicks I've ever seen. Literally sent him flying the other direction, you know what I mean? Or his big looping, big punches. But I think when it comes to boxing, like crisp boxing shots, Pyfer's shots are definitely more powerful. And faster is the more important thing. When his shorter shots are a lot more effective and faster. Al-Hassan's big shots when he winds up are definitely big shots, but the odds of those landing are a little slimmer. Chaos did one punch KO him stiff, so that is going to play a role in me picking Pyfer, who's never been dropped or KO'd in his career so far. And also, Pyfer has his grappling to fall back on. He's looked really good in his grappling matches. Like he grappled Gerald Mearshart, he grappled Eric Anders. He looked really good in those grappling matches. I remember he knocked out Gerald Meerschaert, and Gerald Meerschaert wanted a rematch in grappling because he felt like, oh, I'm the better grappler than this guy. He's the better striker, but ended up not being able to submit Pfeiffer and actually getting out-grappled by him. And then Al Hassan was out-grappled by Buckley in their fight. So, Pfeiffer has that grappling to fall back on if worse comes to worst, and he isn't able to stay away from those big shots of Al Hassan. But yeah, I'm picking Pfeiffer to use his crisp boxing and power to find a knockout in the first round. Maybe late, maybe in the second, but I'm picking Pfeiffer here to get that first round knockout, that statement win over Al Hassan. That'll hopefully he'll be able to call out a bigger name opponent and really start climbing his way towards a ranked opponent in his next few fights. Now, we're going to be going over the main event, Bobby Green versus Grant Dawson. Not much to say here. I think Dawson will go out there. He's going to impose his will, and he's going to control Bobby Green. I think he'll force Green to fight his fight by mixing in the takedowns and setting up his takedowns early with his striking. And I think he's going to find dominant positions once the fight hits the mat. I see the beginning of the first round being mostly a feeling out process, but I do think that Dawson will be able to secure a takedown on Green in the first round. Dawson has gotten a takedown in at least 2 minutes of 30 seconds control time in the first round of his last 4 fights, including the fight he lost to Ricky Glenn. He had a draw to Ricky Glenn. And in his last 3 fights, he hasn't gone a full round where he didn't rack up at least 2 minutes of control time. The only times that this happened in his last 3 fights were the third rounds against Mark Madsen and Jared Gordon, where he submitted them in the third rounds. But every round where he is seeing the final bell of that round in his last 3 fights, he's racked up at least 2 minutes of control time in every single full round that he's been in his last 3 fights. And I think this will be no exception. I think he's gonna get Bobby Green down early, start controlling him early, start imposing his will early. But I don't think I see him getting a first round sub. But honestly, I see him getting a second round sub. I do. I see him getting a second round sub or maybe an early round 3 sub. But I see him getting Bobby Green down in the first round, controlling him a little bit in the first round, getting him down earlier in the second round, controlling him, finding dominant positions, probably the back. He's really good on the back, and maybe he won't find the rear naked choke in the second round, but I think he's going to get him down again in the third round and get him down again, probably earlier than he did in the second round. And as you see what I'm getting at, as the fight progresses, it's going to get worse and worse for Bobby Green, and I just don't see him going the distance here with Grant Dawson. I think he's going to get round 3 sub. Latest. If this goes past the 4th round, I'd be surprised. And I'd give Bobby a lot of credit because after that last fight with Gamir Ismagulov, Grant Dawson proved that he's a legitimate problem in that division and that guys have to watch out. And I don't think that Bobby Green has wrestling to fend off Grant Dawson. I think they're just at such different stages in their career. You know what I mean? Bobby Green has been winning and has been dropping fights, winning fights. He dropped a fight to Fiziev, won a fight against Nasrat, dropped a fight to Dover. And then, he just won a fight against Tony Ferguson. But whereas Grant Dawson's on an absolute tear, he's on I think he's 8 fights unbeaten in the UFC, I think with 1 draw, and I think he only has 1 loss in his whole career. He's 21. It's crazy that these guys are even being matched up with each other. But then if you look at the common opponents, like Bobby Green was losing to Jared Gordon before the headbutt, which was a very controversial headbutt, but still he was losing that fight. And Grant Dawson absolutely smoked Jared Gordon. I just think that they're on complete different levels of their career, levels of skill, complete different paths, and completely different stages in their career. I think that Grant Dawson is the guy who's going to get a few more wins and then be in the top 5. Talking about title shots, I genuinely do. And if you know me, I've been talking about Grant Dawson for a while. He hasn't been putting together these great wins over great guys, but he's been going out there and dominating guys, except the Ricky Glenn fight was a bit of a weird one. But if you look at his fights after the Ricky Glenn fight, he's been getting so much better. Like I said, the stats say it all. If you don't want to go watch the fights, look at the stats. You know what I mean? I've seen the fights, but I'll tell you guys the stats. And the stats, they do tell the story in his fights. He's dominating guys, controlling them, getting them down early and keeping them there. And I think he's going to do the same against Bobby Green and to get a round 3 sub by rear naked choke. That's my official prediction. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully I'll drop another one, reactions to the card, probably on Sunday or Monday. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one, and peace.